Wife teased, sleep with best friend. When I agreed, she froze in passionate clarity. The careless challenge. The Damascus night wrapped around their balcony like velvet as Nadia and Tariq sat with cooling tea between them. City lights twinkled below their modest apartment, and the jasmine plant she'd tended for 3 years released its evening perfume. This was their ritual, stolen moments after long days, where conversation flowed easier than during rushed mornings. You've been distracted lately, Nadia said, tucking her legs beneath her on the cushioned chair. Her dark hair fell loose around her shoulders, the way Tariq once said he loved best. He looked up from his phone with tired eyes. Work project. The deadline moved up again. She nodded, swirling the tea in her cup. Something hollow had been growing inside her for months, a feeling she couldn't quite name. They still shared a bed, still kissed goodbye, still said I love you, but the words felt like memorized lines rather than spontaneous truth. Maybe you need a distraction, she said, attempting lightness. Layla's been asking about you. Tariq's eyebrow raised. Layla had been Nadia's best friend since childhood, recently divorced and frequently joining them for dinners. What about her? He asked. The words tumbled out before Nadia could stop them. Part joke, part test, part self-sabotage. Maybe you should pursue her. You two get along well. I wouldn't mind. She expected him to laugh, to pull her close and dismiss the absurd suggestion. Instead, Tariq set down his phone and looked at her with unsettling steadiness. All right, he said simply. If that's what you want. The jasmine suddenly smelled too sweet. Nadia's heart hammered against her ribs as she stared at her husband, searching for the smile that would reveal he was joking back. But his expression remained calm, measured, devastatingly serious. The night air felt suddenly cold. The silence that screams. Nadia's teacup trembled in her hand. What did you say? I said all right. Tariq's voice carried no anger, no eagerness, just quiet acceptance that somehow felt worse than any emotional reaction. If you genuinely believe that's what would make you happy, I won't stand in your way. Tariq, I was joking. Were you? He leaned forward, elbows on his knees, studying her face the way he used to study architectural blueprints at work. Because it didn't sound like a joke. It sounded like a test. Heat rushed to Nadia's cheeks. She set the cup down before she dropped it. I didn't mean. I wasn't actually suggesting. Then why did you say it? The question hung between them like a blade. Nadia opened her mouth, closed it, opened it again. What could she say? That she felt invisible? That she wondered if he'd even notice if she disappeared? That she needed proof he still wanted her, still chose her among all possibilities? Tariq stood and walked to the balcony railing, gripping it as he looked out over the city. The streetlights cast shadows across his shoulders, shoulders that carried the weight of providing, of being strong, of never complaining even when exhausted. You want to know something, he said without turning. When you respect someone, you don't test their love. You don't create false scenarios to see how they'll react. You talk to them. Nadia felt tears prickling behind her eyes. She'd wanted him to fight for her, to declare his devotion passionately. Instead, he was calling out the manipulation she hadn't even fully acknowledged to herself. Love without boundaries loses meaning, Tariq continued softly. If I can be with anyone, if you're offering me permission to stray, then what makes our commitment special? What makes choosing you every day matter? The words struck like stones against glass, cracking something Nadia had built around her heart. Walls come crashing down. Stop, Nadia whispered, but the word came out broken. Tariq turned to face her, and in the dim balcony light, she saw not anger in his eyes but something more painful, disappointment mixed with understanding. Do you remember our wedding night? He asked gently. You told me that choosing each other was the bravest thing we'd ever do. Not falling in love, that was easy. But choosing to keep loving through ordinary days, through stress and bills and routine. You said that's where real courage lived. The tears spilled over. Nadia remembered. She'd been so certain then, so full of conviction about their future. When had that certainty eroded into insecurity? I feel invisible, she admitted, voice cracking. You come home tired, We eat dinner watching television. We go to bed in silence. You barely touch me anymore except in passing. I see you looking at your phone more than you look at me. The confession poured out like water from a broken dam. I was scared that you'd stopped seeing me. That I'd become just another piece of furniture in your life. Tariq crossed the balcony in 3 strides and knelt before her chair, taking her hands. Nadia. No, let me finish. She pulled in a shaking breath. I suggested Layla because I needed to know if you still wanted me enough to refuse. I needed to know that our marriage still meant something worth protecting. It was stupid and cruel, and I'm sorry, but I felt like I was disappearing and you didn't even notice. Her shoulders shook with sobs she'd been holding back for months. Tariq pulled her into his arms, and she collapsed against his chest, breathing in the familiar scent of him. I noticed, he murmured into her hair. I just didn't know how to reach you anymore. Rebuilding the bridge. They moved inside, away from the cooling night air, settling on the living room sofa where they'd spent countless evenings planning their future. Tariq kept his arm around Nadia as she wiped her tears with the back of her hand. I've been drowning in work stress, he admitted, his voice rough with emotion. The firm's expansion project, the pressure to bring in new clients, trying to prove I deserve the promotion. I've been bringing that weight home and letting it build walls between us. Not intentionally, but thoughtlessly, which might be worse. Nadia looked up at him. You never told me it was that bad. I didn't want to burden you. You have your own work stress with the school reorganization. He ran his hand through his hair, a gesture she recognized as his tell for vulnerability. I thought being strong meant handling everything myself. Instead, I created distance and blamed exhaustion. We both built walls, Nadia said softly. I stopped asking how you were because I was afraid the answer would confirm my fears. I stopped initiating intimacy because I couldn't handle potential rejection. I let silence replace conversation. Tariq pulled her closer. When did we become strangers living in the same home? The question didn't need answering. They both knew, it happened gradually, one missed conversation at a time, one evening of parallel silence after another, one unshared feeling building upon the last. Do you remember when we used to stay up talking about everything and nothing? Nadia asked. When touching each other felt as necessary as breathing. I remember you reading poetry aloud while I sketched building designs, Tariq said, a sad smile crossing his face. You called me your distracted artist. You called me your beautiful disruption. They sat in the weight of memory, of who they'd been and who they'd slowly stopped being. I don't want to lose us, Nadia whispered. Then let's find us again, Tariq replied. Choosing each other again. Dawn light began creeping through the windows as Nadia and Tariq remained intertwined on the sofa, neither wanting to break the fragile reconnect they'd forged through honesty. Starting today, Tariq said, brushing a strand of hair from Nadia's face with tender deliberation, I want to know how you feel. Not surface answers, real answers. Even the uncomfortable ones. And I'll stop testing you, Nadia promised, her fingers tracing patterns on his chest. If I need reassurance, I'll ask for it directly. If I feel distant, I'll say so. No more games or indirect challenges. We need date nights back, he added. Real ones. Where we dress up and remember why we fell in love. And mornings together before the rush, she suggested. Even just 10 minutes of coffee and conversation. Tariq tilted her chin up, his eyes searching hers with an intensity she hadn't seen in months. I choose you, Nadia. Not because there aren't other options, but because you're the only person I want. Your laugh, your stubbornness, your terrible jokes, all of it. I choose building a life with you over any temporary distraction. I choose you too, she whispered. Your quiet strength, your terrible taste in music, the way you hum when you're concentrating. I choose this, us, even when it's hard. Especially when it's hard. He kissed her then, soft and lingering, and it felt like coming home after a long journey. Not the passionate hunger of new love, but something deeper, the recognition of a partner, a witness to your life, someone worth fighting for. As morning light filled their apartment, they held each other close, both understanding that love isn't tested. It's nurtured, communicated, chosen daily with intention and courage. Lessons. True intimacy requires vulnerability, not tests. When we mask our fears with games, we risk losing what we most want to protect. Love deepens not through perfection but through honest confrontation of the distances we create, the walls we build, and the courage to dismantle them together. Commitment means choosing your partner repeatedly through ordinary days, through routine and stress, through silence and misunderstanding, until choosing them becomes who you are. The strongest relationships honor boundaries while creating space for truth, where partners can confess their deepest insecurities and find not judgment, but a hand reaching back in the darkness.